With all of our digital health services now available at every location, from video visits to e-check-in to our app, you may notice that even your in-person visits are a bit more modern. A new experience for our new normal. We're here to keep your health on track, in person or virtually. And we're moving forward, together.
Hello, everyone. It's me. Just kidding. It's Jessica Vosk. I am here live with you today. I get to be your host for our beautiful panel today on integrative health. This is part of the Centerstage with Healthcare Heroes series, and I am with two amazing, very inspirational women today to discuss integrative health and well-being. And this is just going to be a conversation, which I think is so timely because of the fact that we are existing in a pandemic. I like to call it the Coco Row for those of you who follow me. And we're going through it, and it's been happening since March. And for those of you who understand the Broadway shutdown, because that is the field in which I am in, that means that we haven't been at work since March. So I think it's been a roller coaster of ups and downs, very much so, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I think this chat today is going to shed some light on answers that we haven't, answers to the questions that we haven't gotten to ask yet. And I, for one, feel very cool doing this. So without further ado, you all know me. I've been on Wall Street, and then I went to Broadway. Most recently was in that show Wicked, where I played Elphaba, the green person. And now, now I'm doing all of the things, because what do we do in a pandemic? We pivot. So I want to bring on our two guests. First, we have Dr. Gupta. She is an assistant professor. There she is. Hi, Dr. Gupta. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
You know, I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there as best as possibly can be, I think, in these times. So I'm kind of, I'm intrigued to hear all of the information that you have and how you've been doing. And you're an assistant professor of medicine at Weill Cornell. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and a co-founder and co-director of the Integrative Health and Wellbeing program at York-Presbyterian.
Exactly.
And I'm so amazed. I've read up on you, and I'm really amazed that you have sort of had this love of medicine since you were very young, and that you also find the concept of food as healing, as medicine. I think that's just incredible, and something a lot of people maybe don't understand at surface level, but really a healthy lifestyle is the forefront of healthcare versus, just medicine. So I think that's really an amazing thing, and I can't wait to talk to you more about it. Our second guest I'd love to bring on is Jackie Herbach. She is a licensed massage therapist, as well as a licensed master's of social work. We don't have her yet. She's our second guest. Everybody relax. Well, actually, this is great, because I wanted to sort of ask you, for those people who don't know, including myself, can you explain, Dr. Gupta, exactly what integrative medicine is, or integrative health and medicine?
Right. That's the right place to start, because if you were to look up the word or the term, you would probably find 100 different answers. So maybe I'll start by explaining how we mean it. Really, with integrative medicine, it's really an approach. And with integrative care, we aim to provide the most comprehensive care possible. And we do that by bringing together many different methods, many different treatment approaches that you might not expect to find in a typical academic or hospital healthcare setting. You may have heard other terms like alternative medicine. Integrative medicine is quite different from alternative medicine, which became really popular in the US back in the 60s and the 70s. And that's really where somebody seeks out non-evidence-based care in place of standard of care. Now we know that that doesn't lead to good outcomes or healthcare. So from there, complementary medicine, which you may have heard of, became more common. And that's where, maybe you go over here to go see your primary care doctor. Maybe you see a neurologist over here for your migraines. And then maybe you go and see, let's say, a massage therapist or an acupuncturist or somebody else to help deal with the muscle tension that's contributing to those migraines. Now, that's better than alternative medicine because you're still seeking out standard of care. But the problem there is the right hand often doesn't talk to the left, and that can lead to disjointed care and sometimes mistakes and miscommunications with your healthcare. So with integrative medicine, we really bring those therapies, those approaches that have science behind them into the setting where you're getting the rest of your care so that we can make them available in a convenient way, in a coordinated way, and you can still have some oversight of your care by your healthcare team.
Wow. And how did you come up with the idea to bring this to New York-Presbyterian? Is this a program that you've had sort of in your life, or that you have followed, and decided to co-found this? Because I'm sure that it's been super successful for patients.
Yeah, no, I have found that it's, you often can't get questions, very simple questions, even those things answered by healthcare providers these days, whether that's due to time, occasionally it's due to lack of knowledge as well. But it's usually because in Western medicine, we don't emphasize those things as much as we do other approaches. So, I mean, I was lucky where I was able to grow up with the concept that the way we live everyday life is important. It has short-term healthcare impacts. It has long-term healthcare impacts. So I was lucky in that sense. During some of my medical training, I realized that I couldn't answer my patients' questions the way that I wanted to, right? I would take care of patients after heart attacks and see them get served, not great food for heart health when they're being discharged, and not be able to tell them specifically what they can do or what they cannot do to prevent this from happening again. And so from there, it was just a lot of self-learning. Here at York-Presbyterian and at Weill Cornell, there was a lot of support within leadership to cultivate this type of care and help to fill in some of those gaps that we think exist.
Wow. I mean, I love that you mentioned that because I'm an acupuncture junkie. I love to go as a singer. A lot of my scalenes and my traps are very tight from the fact that I belt all the time and that most of my tension happens to be in my upper body and shoulders. And I find that, in conjunction with anything I might need from my general practitioner or, medically, to be something that saves my life on a weekly basis, as far as pain could be concerned, and stress. When I was a Wall Street financial person in my past life before I decided to do what I loved, I found that my body, and maybe you can answer this for me, and if anybody out there has questions that you want to type into your little YouTube, blippity bloopy box and ask Dr. Gupta or Jackie Herbach when we bring her on. If you want to ask any questions, I will be the mediator because I'm the host, you guys. So, but my question, I guess, for you, Dr. Gupta, is when you are stressed out, if people are stressed out, which I guess stress is high octane right now because we are in the middle of a pandemic, we got a lot going on. We've got a lot of politics happening. Everybody has social media up at all times. We've got our screens up at all times. We're watching the news. I remember my old life in finance. I would get so stressed that I would get panic attacks and I would sweat and I didn't know where it was coming from. And I wonder how that impacts your health. I mean, how stress actually does impact health. People always say, oh, I'm so stressed out, or I live in New York and it's just a stressful thing. How do you find that it really impacts somebody's physical health, being stressed? For those naysayers who are like, it does stress, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put that question. I think when we tend to talk about stress and think about stress, we tend to think about it as an external thing. Like, for example, that news is stressful, or this work situation is stressful, or this relationship is stressful. But when I talk about stress, I'm really talking about it in a medical sense. And stress is truly, it's an internal response. It's not an external thing. There might be challenging situations, but that stress response is very much an internal response that we've cultivated through our thoughts, through our experiences, throughout our lives, and that changes with time. It's important to remember that we're always responding to our environment in some way in any given moment. It's mostly subconscious. Like, for example, if you think about something that causes you worry right now, let's pretend it's a difficult work situation. That's pretty neutral. So you can probably imagine or think of 10 people that you know in that same situation, and they would probably respond in 10 different ways, because we've each cultivated our own internal stress response, and we've each cultivated our behavioral responses to that stress response. And it's that activation of that internal stress response that really has an impact on our minds and bodies. And in short term, we've probably all experienced, and we're probably very familiar with some of those impacts. Like, who here has not experienced stress disrupting your sleep, or stress affecting your mood, like making you anxious or jittery, or for some people it might make them feel more down or depressed. But the way that I think about the more serious and more long-term health impacts is a little bit different, because our bodies have, basically, you have your conscious nervous system that allows me to say, okay, I'm going to pick up this pen, now I'm going to put it down. And then you have your subconscious nervous system. And that is, you can also call that your automatic nervous system. And that subconscious automatic nervous system has two modes. And it can be in either one, depending on how we've kind of trained and conditioned ourselves. We could be in fight or flight mode, or survival mode, or what many people describe as always being on, or go, 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 or amped up, or wired. Or we can
get that. That's my life.
Yeah. I'm sure you especially, right? Because you literally have to be on.
Sure. I mean, you're in New York. We're all sitting here sort of going, well, and my business right now is sort of flatlined, for lack of a better, way to put it. But it's, you have to be a self-starter. Therefore, I feel like we are constantly in fight or flight. As actors, like if you're in an audition room, or if you have a bad show, or if you walk on stage for the first time, your nervous system is constantly go, go, go. So, and it's hard to come down after all that excitement. After you have a 3-hour show, I always tell people that I'm teaching, or people who are asking, why are you up until 2 a.m? Well, because I actually have to come down from the natural high. But that also is kind of stressful. So,
right.
You're right.
No, exactly. And so that fight or flight mode evolved to keep us safe in life-threatening situations, right? In dangerous situations. But we can also go into it in slightly less appropriate situations, right? When we're not actually in danger, but something like what you just described is going on, or something bad has happened, or you get into an argument, or even you get an email that you don't like. Even something as simple as that can flip us over into fight or flight mode. And when you go into that mode for a few seconds or minutes or hours or even days after something happens, not a big deal. But when we're in that chronically stressed mode for week after week and month after month, year after year, it can have some more dramatic health impacts, including it can impact your immunity, it can impact your weight, it can impact digestion, it can impact heart health, and a whole host of other ways too.
Ooh, well, this is a great segue. I'd love to bring Jackie on as well, since we have her here. She's with us, Jackie Herbach. Come on in.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, so nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too, Jessica.
Thank you for being here. I can sort of hear a little echo. is there a speaker nearby?
Yeah, I think, you know what, I was trying to get to you guys on my cell phone, so I'm just going to move that. Okay.
I mean, speaking of what you were talking about as far as stress is concerned, what are ways for us, and a lot of performers are going to be asking this question and watching this, but what are ways for us to combat that? What do you find that you have told patients, or, you know, I know that I try and eat, you know, as healthy a diet as possible, and Jackie, as a licensed massage therapist and a master of social work, which you incorporate into your work, as far as these methods are concerned, when we're discussing stress and how to healthfully combat it. I guess the question that I have, and maybe a lot of people have, is how the HE double hockey sticks do we do that? How do we you know, we're not going to be perfect at everything. I know that I stress out, like you said. I get an email, I've seen red over that kind of stuff, and I want to be able to be better about that and to be more healthful in my mindset. And I'm wondering, how do we combat that? What are some ways to do that?
I think one of the ways is learning mindfulness and meditation is really helpful. And sometimes when you say that to people, they're like, meditation, you know, I can't sit there for an hour and not say or think about anything. And it's really not about that. They always, you know, you've heard this before, it's called a practice. Okay. So little by little, you get better at it. And when you do begin a practice of meditation, you're beginning to calm the mind. And what Dr. Gupta was talking about regarding our parasympathetic nervous system, when we breathe, that system gets stimulated. It's also known as the rest and digest system. So just simple breathing can begin to calm one's physical reactions to stress. So I think taking, and there's so many classes these days online for meditation out there right now, which is one of the few gifts of COVID, I think, is the variety of different programming that you have out there now to learn meditation. So
I love that. And I will tell you, Jackie, you have me pinned down, because I am one of those people that's like, I'm sorry, 1 minute in, I'm already thinking about my groceries and, oh God, did I call that person back? Am I going on a date? Not at the coronavirus times, but you know, like my brain goes to all places very fast.
Right.
And I'm sure, I mean, but I know that you have a BFA in theater.
Yes, I do.
and so it's pretty amazing that you, I would say, kind of understand the intersection of performance and how to remain mindful, and what it's like for performers to have to do that and try and reel it in, because we can oftentimes be, you know, it's the anchor in the balloon. We're the balloon. Right. Very hard to anchor ourselves down, but and stress is a huge thing right now for all of us who are jobless. Until further notice. So we're all pivoting, which creates more stress. And I wonder, what do you see most as far as health for the two of you, when there's stress involved? What do you see decline most? I mean, for me, I feel very off balance and sometimes anxious and depressed, and I don't feel like myself some days. Do you think is that a normal response to stress, or you know, during a pandemic?
Well, I mean, stress has so many symptoms. There's so many ways to go with stress. I mean, some people get depressed, some people get anxious. So people that used to be extroverts are now introverts, and vice versa. Some people turn to different types of substances, you know, alcohol, drugs, food, shopping, online, I guess. You know, people, yeah, me too. You know, sometimes, but when you're feeling depressed and anxious and all those things, it really affects your immune system, you know, and right now, one of the things we all want to do is really keep our immune system strong. So, not only can we get there through what we eat and, exercising, but it's also how we think. If we're in a really bad place and we're feeling, frustrated because of the current situation that's going on. And as performers, if you're not performing, you're not doing, and it's even more frustrating. It's like, what do you do with all that excess energy? So you got to find somewhere to put it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. There's only so many times I can sing to myself in my living room is basically what I tell to people, but I love a good pivot. And I'm doing a bunch of other things that I, again, like you said, would never have had the chance to do. So sort of trying to look on the bright side does change my physical mindset, because I find that even when I'm physically active, and I feel like maybe you both could agree with this, because I wanted to ask you first, Dr. Gupta, what performers can be doing to actually stay at the top of their game and stay healthy. And for me, the first thing I did at quarantine was I bought a Peloton. And if I don't get physical, at least like once, I have to get physical, because there's an attachment for me in a major way of my physical and mental health. I don't know why. I mean, but you do probably. Is this something that even it wasn't for like, I need to lose X amount of pounds or anything like that. It was just, I have to get the zoomies out. And I wonder what the correlation is. Like when you find that somebody's like, I am so effing depressed, I can't handle this. And then they work out and all of a sudden it's like rainbows and sunshine. Why is that?
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head when you're talking about how that stress response manifests differently for different people. But one of the most common things I hear is exactly what you just said. Either, you might be irritable, you might feel pent up, too much energy kind of pent up. And that's because that's kind of what it is. I'm going to get technical a little bit to answer your question, I think. So
technical. That's all I could. I get it. Bring it on.
So like when your brain is experiencing stress, basically if your brain is on stress, the parts of our brain that we're activating are the primitive areas of our brain, like the lower down areas of the brain. We literally call this the monkey brain because it exists very similarly in monkeys. It's not recently evolved, and it's reactive, it's reactionary. That monkey mind, when we're constantly activating it through negative emotions, whether it's anger or fear or sadness or anxiety or stress or whatever we want to call it, it actually sends signals to other more highly evolved areas of your brain, like the prefrontal cortex right behind your forehead. And the more recently evolved areas, and what makes us humans. It's the human part of our brain. Those are the parts of the brain that allow us to think strategically. They allow us to regulate our emotions. They allow us to regulate our actions and even regulate our thoughts. So that's why when you're stressed, you're more likely to be irritable, because your primitive brain is basically saying that human stuff is really not important. I'm in survival mode right now. And so I'm not going to prioritize that. So it's a totally natural response. That's the bad news. The good news is you can actually change that. We can train the brain away from the monkey mind, and we can train the more human parts of our brain through practices like what Jackie mentioned, mindfulness, meditation, and those actually strengthen the areas that allow us to regulate our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. In fact, when we look at studies of people who practice mindfulness and meditation regularly, we actually see that those more highly evolved areas of the brain literally get more active and get more well connected to other parts of the brain. And we see that those primitive areas, such as the amygdala, literally could shrink in size and get less well connected. And a couple of studies have even shown that the area of the brain called the hippocampus, that's responsible for creating short-term memories, like where did I put that pair of glasses, or what did I do with that, or how that conversation went, that area can actually grow in volume. So really profound structural and functional changes that we can't replicate through a medication or any other type of practice right now. It's really cool.
Wow. I think that this is the coolest. And I wonder, Jackie, if you have any, for those who are watching, who are either a performer like me, I have those people who follow me are very, they're either, budding performers. I have several people who are very focused on mental health. I did that as I touched my head, like this is a thing. They're very focused on mental health and very, helping others and social work and et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering if you have any, and a lot of performers watching this who are my colleagues, if you have any exercises, maybe one or two that you find people can really latch onto when it comes to what Dr. Gupta was talking about in serving our brain in a better way than only staying in primitive function.
Right. Yeah, there's many situations now where we want to go to that, panic place. Not just the virus, just, that plus personal stuff, plus performing, plus waiting in the audition room, even if it's via Zoom these days, so one of the things to do is just to ground your breath. Very, very simple, because as Dr. Gupta mentioned, our mind, the monkey mind, just likes to race from one thought to another. That's its job, is to distract us, is to throw us off of our game, and to make us even more anxious. So a simple thing that I like to do is I place my hands just on my lower belly, or sometimes on my chest. Either one, or one on one and one on the other, so you can have both. And just begin to take some breaths where you feel your stomach expand out on the inhale, and your chest can rise a little bit. And then as you exhale, you just want to feel the belly pull in, and the chest will drop a little bit. So sometimes if you count, inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 1, 2, 3, 4. You want to make it as simple as possible, especially when you're feeling very anxious or you're in a situation where you're maybe in the room with a lot of people, and you can't be doing some like major like lying down on the floor, and closing your eyes thing. So, but you can count your breath quietly to yourself. So I think if you can get your breath under control, then the other systems in your body start to follow that signal from the breath, and everything begins to calm down. Your heart rate, your blood pressure, all those other things that are going on when we're stressed. If you have more time and more privacy, a simple thing to do, if you practice some yoga, just do a simple child's pose. Something not super athletic. You want something very grounding, okay, as child's pose is. You could lie on your back, if you're able to do that. But your breath is the one thing that we have with us all the time. You don't need any special equipment. So I would really go with that first. Because one thing I've learned in life so far is I cannot control anything. I mean, I like to think I can.
Are we related, Jackie? Are we related?
I think we are.
I think we are.
Yeah, because really, I can't control anything except my own thoughts. That's the only thing I can control. And if I can start to learn to do that by slowing my breath down to make me calmer, and then that monkey mind thoughts start, they stop coming in from all different directions. And I can just focus on the tasks that I need to do, whether it's, get ready for my performance, audition, whatever it is, and just keep the focus on yourself. That's another thing. I know in audition rooms, there's a lot of, I call it compare and despair. You start comparing, you're going to go down that spiral of despairing. And it's and you're going to throw your whole game off. You don't want to be like the aloof actor that never says hello to anyone, but you do want to, be grounded and keep the focus on yourself, and do what you're there to do, then afterwards you can go out for coffee.
Yeah. Well, yes, no, that makes perfect sense, because I know all of those, if you tell me an audition room, it's automatically I go back to the place of oh God. So I know, I know that feeling. And I also, I'm wondering, if the two of you can answer this, because everybody talks about, the fact that we have our cell phones and why we shouldn't be looking at them before we go to bed. And I have been trying something lately before, because I used to have it in bed with me. I used to be like, it's the Coco Roro. What else am I going to do? So I used to sit there in bed, and I felt like it really disrupted my sleep. So I've been trying this thing where I turn my phone off. I'm not allowed to look at it after a certain amount of time. And I really think it's improved my sleep. And obviously there must be some kind of connection, to the brain and how that affects us. And I feel like we rely so much on our technology right now, especially in the coronavirus, because we are on it so much. How do we stay on top of that? Are there things that we can do to make sure that we're not hurting our eyes, our brain, our stress levels through all of that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yes, blue light can definitely interfere with it. Basically prevents your brain from secreting melatonin, which is a really important brain chemical that helps to regulate our circadian rhythm, so our sleep cycles. Some people find that as they get a little bit older, that they're a little bit more sensitive to those things. So you'll see devices and manufacturers try to combat that by offering filters and it automatically shifting to a yellower, a different type of light after a certain hour. So those things are somewhat helpful. But I think it's also important to be aware of why we choose to go to those things. And what I find that is when we're on all day or go all day and never have a moment of a break, we tend to choose passive things, like passive activities, such as TV, movies, consuming social media passively, like scrolling endlessly down Instagram until you get that check mark and it says, you're all caught up, do you want to keep going, right? I mean, we've all done that. It's just easier to do because it's passive. You don't have to think about it, and it's not an active process. Some of the techniques that Jackie just described, like the simple breathing strategies, or really anything that makes you deliberately shift your attention to anything, can be really helpful in switching you out of that mode and make it less tempting to pick up that phone. And many things can be meditation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be meditation. Something like listening to music, creating music, journaling, dance, breathing, all of those things can act in similar ways.
And so obviously, Jackie, you have a background in the arts and dance and all this kind of stuff. So I'm thinking you agree with all of these sentiments.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I first of all, my cell phone stays downstairs, plugged in to an outlet in the kitchen. So I don't even take it into my room. Unless there's an emergency situation and I need to have a phone by me, but otherwise I don't take it. I have pretty strict rules. I try not to watch anything super stimulating called the news. Anything, but an hour before I go to bed, because I can sit there and watch CNN, and get hooked in, which is very easy these days because there's just so much going on. So I try to, I'll watch even a sitcom, or something that is going to make me laugh, The other thing that I do is I try to be aware of okay, I'm going to go to bed and then the next 45 minutes or whatever. So I start preparing my little rituals, that get me into that, we're going into sleepy time mode here. So it's I wash my face, I brush my teeth. I might, I have a diffuser and I put in some lovely aromatherapy oils of some lavender, jasmine, something very calming. I kind of set the mood, I make sure that there's no lights. My husband is a gadget guy, galore. And there's always a flashing blue light, and I'm like, what is that? Get rid of that. Well, I'm recharging my toothbrush. Well, do it during the day. Don't do it at night when I get this blink. I'm at a club out of the corner of my eye, So little things like that, make sure your room is dark enough. get those the blackout curtains if you need to. What Dr. Gupta said, it might be relaxing to listen to some music or maybe even read a book, but read a fun book. Don't read like, the history, since the beginning of time book. Read something that's light or whatever you enjoy. And that sometimes also can make you sleepy, and then you have a better time falling asleep. Less distractions, more darkness. Works for me.
Yeah, no, I actually do meditations before sleep as well. I have there's an app specifically designed for sleep meditations, and I love it. We have a question, our first question from a viewer, and they wanted to know what is it specifically about stress that actually causes long-term medical issues like a reduced immune system? And I would love to know myself.
Yeah, so stress is a complicated thing that impacts us in a lot of ways, like some of the things that we've talked about. To answer this question specifically, what it does is it activates basically a hormonal cascade. So it'll make your body create and also release certain stress-related hormones. You may have heard of the stress hormone cortisol, for example. Your body might also release other things similar to adrenaline. And those things, because they favor those more survival type of effects, they don't favor immunity. So they literally can decrease your immunity. And so that's how stress impacts that.
So is it also fair to say, like, when I was doing Wicked, I found myself sick more often because I feel like my stress level of leading a show, on top of the fact that it was the 15th anniversary and there was sort of everything was coming at me from a different angle of all the things I needed to do. I very much hardly any sleep. Is that probably why I got sick more?
That's very possible. You mentioned a couple of things there that could be influencing it. Really important things for your immunity include sleep, which you mentioned you might be getting less of, right? That stress response and those hormones that we release as a result, and also the fuel, like food and drink that we have, also really important for immunity. Things that are really nutrient dense, packed with vitamins and minerals, like vegetables and fruits, those things will naturally boost immunity a bit. They contain compounds like vitamin C and other things that can help to fend off infections. And things like alcohol, for example, may depress your immunity. So all of these things in concert can definitely increase or decrease your immunity.
What about you, Jackie? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, stress is just what was it? The number one killer. That's what they're always saying. You hear that everywhere. I mean, it affects everything. I mean, stress is going to affect how your body pumps blood, and how it raises your blood pressure. And over time, you constantly raise your blood pressure. You're going to have blood pressure problems, or maybe even worse, heart problems. I mean, stress is just really bad. I can't stress how much stress is bad. Okay, it really can cause so many issues, and I've also seen people that then develop chronic kind of problems from stress. Nothing maybe necessarily life-threatening, but chronic issues that are hard to deal with. So really getting control over stress, and how we think about it really is key, I think.
And can I piggyback on that?
Yes.
Because I realize that, it's also not helpful to stress about stress, right? That's counterproductive, right? Something that I sometimes find helpful is just refocusing on the positive things. So Jessica, the way that you mentioned earlier, like looking on the bright side, if you find yourself in a holding pattern, or if you find yourself down in the dumps or depressed or anxious or any of these things, I try to use those times to refocus, remind myself about things that I do have, even if they're small things, remind myself for things that I'm grateful for. And perhaps at the top of that list, remind myself of the things that bring me purpose and make my life meaningful. And when you focus in on those things, I find that I end up directing my energy and directing my efforts a lot more productively, rather than focusing on all of those things that are bringing those negative feelings or negative thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I could work on that more. I should just say I could work on that more versus being like, oh, ho hum, I have my health, I have my dog, who's my son basically, and we're, life is good. It could be a lot worse. So I think that is something for me to remember. And we have one more question, if you both don't mind. We have a question from someone with an autoimmune disease, and I think that's important now because, of course, coronavirus. The very beginning of this, all we heard was if you are immunosuppressed, if you have, something that is already hurting your body, like diabetes, etc. This is extra stressful and scary. So there's like another thing of stress. And this person says they have an autoimmune disease and they're fighting flare-ups. And do you have any advice on thoughts how to combat flare-ups? This is something that I don't understand, which I would love to understand more. So do you have any advice on how to sort of combat flare-ups?
Yeah, I think this is probably a more personal question that is probably best to chat about one-on-one. I'm happy to help out in any way, but let me just speak generally. An autoimmune condition is something where, for whatever reason, your immune system can be overactive, and it can cause inflammation throughout the body, in tissues, in joints, and muscles, and in different places, depending on what illness we're talking about. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a better immune system. It doesn't make you have higher immunity. You can actually have lower immunity with an autoimmune illness. Now, some of those things are within our control that contribute to autoimmune illness, and then some are within our control. Some things that are within our control are going to be any elements of lifestyle that are anti-inflammatory in nature. So, for example, you can have a diet that's anti-inflammatory in nature by reducing inflammatory things, like reducing sugars and added sugars, reducing food additives, reducing processed foods, and focusing more on like whole food and nutrient-dense foods, like vegetables, fruits, whole grains, lean proteins, and healthy sources of fat. Jessica, you earlier mentioned physical activity. That's one of the most anti-inflammatory things that you can do if you can do it without physically injuring yourself. Your body and mind, you release chemicals like endorphins and other things that fight inflammation when you do that. And then finally,
I'm sorry to interject, Dr. Gupta. I know and love a lot of people in my family and friends who battle arthritis. And so when you said diet that's anti-inflammatory, that's where my brain went. And I wonder if that is a huge key factor, if in things like arthritis or other autoimmune diseases, where you see a big difference in somebody who's battling that.
Yeah, and there are different types of arthritis. So rheumatoid arthritis is probably the most common autoimmune source of arthritis. And yes, I absolutely see that anti-inflammatory approaches can improve quality of life and improve pains for some people. Osteoarthritis is the more common type of arthritis, and that's just the degeneration that happens in the joints after a lifetime of walking. Like many of us will probably outlive our knees, for example. And that, even that you could, if let's say we're talking about somebody who put on a few pounds, that's more work for your knees to do. So there are a lot of things that could feed into maybe decreasing that load, for example.
Yeah, exercise I think is really important to talk about, because many times when you mention exercise to people, they're put off because they're like, I'm not lifting, all these weights and running a marathon. And, I think people have to learn that there are so many different types of exercise, and you have to find the one that's appropriate for you, and just because method is different than the other person that's running a marathon doesn't make yours any less, not as valued or good for your body. Okay, because someone like with an autoimmune system may not be able to do, hardcore lifting or whatever, but they might be able to do like a gentle yoga class, or go for a walk. So it's not as, it's not as pounding on their joints that they're trying to take care of.
Yeah, it's everything. But before we finish, because we're almost at time here, it's amazing to me how all of these things are connected, that you are both experts at, how mental and physical and emotional well-being are sort of, they all intersect, and one helps the other, each sort of balances each other out, which is probably been too many of our detriments during coronavirus. We don't know how to balance it properly. So, so I want to thank you both for shedding some light on how we can actually do that and feel a little bit more balanced about our day-to-day lives and activities, because otherwise it can seem so overwhelming. So for those who are watching, who can at least take like a sigh of relief of like, okay, I can try these mindfulness exercises, and I can try to integrate, healthier foods into my diet, and see, after a month, what type of changes that brings to my body and my mind. But so before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to leave the viewers with, as far as words of advice, or in moving forward for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I would say, the other thing right now during this pandemic time is that it's really easy to focus on the negative, okay, what we've been talking about, and that causes stress. And I think I have found from my own personal experience, when I'm feeling down about anything, that I try to get out of myself, out of my own head. And I try to do something else with someone else, and it used to be like I would do volunteer work, and I would immediately stop thinking about me and get really involved in whatever activity I was doing to help the person or organization I was doing it with, and that may not be as available in these times to go out there and do volunteer work. But I do think that sharing your feelings with someone else and talking about it and keeping it on the table and not keeping it inside, even if it's through Zoom, or having a coffee gathering on Sunday at 3:00, or a cocktail, or whatever your thing is, and just don't keep it all inside, because when you keep it inside, it just grows and grows and grows. And just keep talking about it, and if you really feel bad, find a professional to speak to. Find someone to speak to, or get a referral from someone you trust to speak to, because the last thing we need these days is just to do this alone. It's too hard. It really is.
Oh, thank you for that. That was extremely helpful. Dr. Gupta?
Yeah, I think you hit on such a nice point there. The importance of human connection is something that, might have found that you lost a little bit. I certainly missed some things in some settings that I used to be able to participate in. So I can understand that. I hope that you're all still connecting with people, even if it's in small, distanced ways. But that human connection is really important. And really what I would take home message here is health and well-being is really a daily thing. It's a little bit at a time. Slow, steady change is usually going to be better than doing something drastically for a few months and then kind of falling off the wagon.
Yeah.
And things that we can all do to remain healthy every day are taking care of ourselves through eating well, drinking well, moving, sleeping, and then nurturing the people and the things around you that are the most important to you. So I think that's the way I would look at it right now.
That's amazing. I know so many people are going to get so much out of this conversation. So I want to thank you both so much for your time. I know that you're probably extremely busy. If I'm busy, you must be super busy. So thank you so much for just taking the time to sit here and chat with me. And for everybody out there watching, you can see Dr. Gupta, Jackie Herbach on your screen right now. They are both just amazing human beings for doing this, and masters in their field. And all of you can watch this YouTube link for I don't know how long, maybe forever, ever, and hopefully get as much out of it as I did today. Thank you both so much again, and hopefully we will connect in person when this is all over. But until then, stay safe, and thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was an honor. Thanks. Nice.
With all of our digital health services now available at every location, from video visits to e-check-in to our app, you may notice that even your in-person visits are a bit more modern. A new experience for our new normal. We're here to keep your health on track, in person or virtually. And we're moving forward, together.